Oh howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. This week is going to see the launch of patch 3.20.1. This is going to have a number of expansions to the Sanctum, as well as some bug fixes to Blight support on the Atlas passive tree that's actually going to result in the reworking of several nodes, because a number of them are causing serious bugs that don't come up in every single map, but come up often enough that those nodes have had to be redesigned. Let's just start with a note that this may come out today, tomorrow, or Friday. GGG are pretty sure they're going to have it out at some point this week. Additionally, this is going to have the new core series supporter packs, the ones that are replacing the Imperator, Nullifier, Ravager, and the like tiers. The first thing they're changing is they're adding 7 new unique relics. These I consider to be more like a scarab than a relic. Relics are something that's a permanent option for you to use. These are something that once they're used, they're consumed. You will use one of these to modify your next Sanctum run. 3 of the 7 relics have no impact on how difficult your next Sanctum run is, except that they take up space that could be used for other relics that make it easier, whereas the others actually make it harder as well as taking up space that could be used by better relics. And in exchange for that, there'll be additional drops. The hardest of them all can award you the unique ring, the Original Sin, which is kind of crazy. All elemental damage you inflict is converted to chaos damage. Nearby enemies' chaos resistance is 0. This is extremely strong, and this is something you can only get by doing the ultimate hard mode Sanctum run. I do not recommend that players theorycraft around using the Original Sin. I think this item is going to be extremely expensive and extremely hard to get your hands on, because it's only available from doing a completely no-hit Sanctum run at monster level 80 or above. So some of these unique relics will cause the Herald of the Scourge to drop additional or specific items like the Original Sin, whilst others cause Aureus coins to be converted to certain outcomes upon defeating the Herald. Now there's also going to be 41 new Lycia's Invocation currency items. These can be applied to non-corrupted sanctified relics to add a specific keystone to those relics. Boons and afflictions that provide increases and reductions to the effect of your relics now specify that they do not apply to unique relics. And then we have a major change that has no numbers attached to it. Characters that are up close to their target now take even less damage to their resolve. Now this could be a change that makes a number of builds that are not currently viable in the league viable, at least for the Sanctum content, or it could be a nothing change. We don't have numbers on it, and as a result, you can't really say anything. I'm still not going to advise players to play melee builds in this league, unless that is much more substantial than GGG are making out with that line. Sanctum quests are going to stand out a little bit more because the Sanctum quests are really important. There's a couple of changes to Sanctum in party play, and there's also a number of minor quality of life things related to relics and sanctified relics. The wave skill that's used by the final form of the Sanctum boss now spawns far fewer lightning bolts with each wave, though the lightning bolts are slightly larger. The delay between each wave has been increased. You can no longer gain certain afflictions, the boons and afflictions that have multiple stages, if you already have a later stage of the same boon or affliction. The Hungry Fangs affliction and Wooden Effigy boon now impact resolve multiplicatively, instead of being additive with stats that affect resolve on relics. And then there's a couple of other tiny things. Now there's some other little changes that are being made as well. The first couple of these relate to microtransactions. After that, Huck will now bring his rogue equipment when accompanying you in maps. Huck bringing his rogue gear is actually a fairly big deal here. What this will do is make your character quite a lot stronger in maps when this comes up. And that's because Huck can bring the Aura Haste with him. The Aura Haste was buffed a lot in patch 3.19, but still it tends to be most builds' 4th best Aura. And generally speaking, most builds can only fit 3 unless they're willing to invest pretty hard in auras. Huck can bring it along for you. You definitely want level 15 on this, not because haste scales all that much from level 5 to 10 to 15 in terms of the amount of movement speed, attack speed, and cast speed it grants. It does get better, but not by all that much. The key thing is that the radius increases from 5 to 10 to 15, and this means that Huck's Haste Aura will have a higher uptime on your player. It can only roll on arrowhead item slots for the rogue gear. So if you're running a high stat list, then definitely roll Huck and arrowhead and it will make your mapping better. There's been a significant increase to the amount of XP that's gained by killing Metamorph monsters. Really hope they get this right. Betrayal gets XP from doing league content right, and pretty much nothing else does. You can no longer animation cancel Vaal Venom Gyre, Vaal Volcanic Fissure, Vaal Blade Flurry, Vaal Caustic Arrow, and Vaal Molten Strike before the point in the animation that the damage is dealt. This is a buff. Vaal Caustic Arrow, at least I have experience with here, it is very easy to accidentally lose a use of it, because you start initiating the skill, then you start moving, thinking that you've already gotten to the point where you can move, and you haven't, and then you end up losing your use of Vaal Caustic Arrow and also having the skill go on Soul Gain Prevention cooldown. Now that's no longer going to happen. However, you will be rooted in place for a little bit longer with this change. That said, it is an improvement overall. The Balance of Terror unique jewel, this thing is phenomenal. This is the curse-based Watcher's Eye. If you're not using one, definitely have a look at the mods that are available on it. This is something that you should seriously consider. It comes from the Herald of the Scourge, and it's really good. It no longer has a level requirement, which is neither here nor there. Two changes are being made that affect challenges. One is a straight-up bug fix. Killing the Syndicate Mastermind now gives credit for killing the Syndicate Mastermind. The other one relates to Harbinger, and it's going to have a fairly big impact on the Trade League economy. So generally speaking, anytime there is a challenge that requires you to use exactly one of a very rare currency, this tends to have a big effect late in the league in making that thing very expensive. The Sacred Orb in 3.16 was an example where the price on that thing exploded late league. And also I think it may have been 3.16 as well, that the Awakener's Orb and the Maven's Orb got very expensive because there was a challenge to use both of them. There is a change to the Harbinger challenge that means you no longer need to use a Fracturing Orb for it. You can instead just use an Ancient Orb or a Harbinger's Orb. This is going to be a buff to players who just want to get their challenges done and aren't interested in farming Harbinger content. This is going to be a buff to players who want to use Fracturing Orbs to craft. And it's going to be a nerf to players who are running Harbinger content specifically. On the balance, I think players will mostly be pretty happy with this change. But if you were using Harbinger Scarabs, then you are going to feel pretty bad about this change being made. There's been a couple of other really small changes, and then we have the changes to Blight. So it turns out that there were some serious problems with areas that were intended to have 2 Blights in them. When the game was putting a second Blight encounter into a zone, it would sometimes only be able to fit one. This is causing lots of problems, obviously lots of bug reports. GGG have decided that everything about getting 2 Blights in one map is being scrapped and reworked. So, mechanics that allow 2 Blights in one map are now going to do something else. Small Atlas passives now provide 5% chance on completing your maps to gain a free use of the Blight map crafting option. You can see this as being reasonably in line with getting a rusted Blight Scarab, albeit one that you can't trade to other players. And the Mycelial Swarm Atlas passive is now going to provide the Blight map crafting option is always available, and 50% reduced cost of this Blight map crafting option. Essentially, this is going to allow you to always have Blight, even if it's not a Kirak mod that league. I would have liked this in the past, in earlier eras of the game, when Blight Scarabs were a little bit more expensive than they are now. One thing I can see this being of use with, though, there's one Atlas Keystone that prevents the use of Scarabs and one that dramatically modifies it, and this could be quite useful if you're running an Atlas based on those, and that is also running Blight support. All of the annoyance on Blighted Maps have been buffed. This is a modest buff to Blighted Maps and a massive, massive buff to Blight Ravaged maps. This is to replace some of the past Atlas passive tree support for Blight that left in 3.20 that used to affect Blighted Maps. This is intended to be a fair bit of a buff overall, and I expect that when you take all of these factors together, it's going to roughly break even or be slightly better than it used to be. A couple of those changes are being made in a slightly toned down way in Ruthless, and so that's also detailed here. One thing of interest that Ruthless has done that has accidentally spilled over into the core game, I expect this is like one of the lowest priority bugs in the world for GGG to fix right now, is that if you have a map that is simultaneously qualityed and unidentified, then there is a Ruthless only stat where in Ruthless you get increased map drop chance. And that's something that you can get in place of item quantity that you would normally get in the core game. You also get smaller amounts of it in Ruthless. Well, this stat is currently showing up in the core game if you have a map that is simultaneously qualityed and unidentified. That's something that's a little bit funny to see. GGG aren't mentioning any plans to fix it, and really it's probably a very, very low priority fix because it's having a very small impact on the number of maps that exist in the game. Now, there's a number of little bug fixes to the Sanctum, and then we get on to the other bug fixes area, which has got some big ones in it. So firstly, we have a bug fix where Labyrinth Trials were not spawning in maps. They'll be able to spawn again. You won't need to use any of the workarounds that we've been doing in the last week and a half, whether that be forcing one on there through a Kirak mission, or whether it be plucking your offering to the goddess out of a ritual window or out of the delve mines. You'll now be able to get them through normal gameplay again. And importantly, this means that the main source of upgraded Labyrinth Trials will be back online again. There's an interesting bug that I didn't know about where Vaal side areas that were created by placing a Vaal fragment in the map device did not have any modifiers applied to them. I didn't know that was the case, but that's getting fixed. Incursion unique flasks and jewels will be able to be upgraded at the Altar of Sacrifice again. An important bug that was very dangerous to players is being fixed, and that is that sources that reduce the duration of elemental ailments on you, such as Anointed Flesh on the passive tree, were not applying to ignites. And one that's very important to a small number of builds, fixed a bug where elemental ailments that have an additional effect to monsters that are affected by that ailment, such as Combustion support or Bonechill support, that these ailments were being discarded when a stronger ignite or chill was applied without those added effects. So Bonechill support will now work as intended. Combustion support will now work as intended. These have been weaker than intended, and actually this has been the case since 3.15. There is a significant emergency fix to the Balance of Terror unique jewel. Again, this is that jewel that we were talking about before that has the Watcher's Eye style mods for curses. One of the mods was causing you to gain a percentage of physical damage as a random element if you've cast Elemental Weakness in the past 10 seconds. But the percentage it's meant to give was being ignored and it was giving 100% instead. This is being fixed. This is being nerfed so that the jewel will work the way that it says it works, rather than the ridiculously OP way that it does at the moment. Another particularly important change here, the Eternal Damnation unique amulet, which is one of the new items that was added this patch. It has had a bug on it that has prevented the additional elemental damage reduction that it grants from applying to Righteous Fire. This is going to be fixed. So Eternal Damnation will be very good on Righteous Fire builds, and this is a further buff to Righteous Fire Juggernauts. They probably don't want to use this amulet still, but it is something that they can consider if they just want to be giga tanky. And one bug that certainly people have asked me a bit about over in Ruthless, fixed a bug where blueprints were not dropping at all in Ruthless. Anyways, there's quite a lot in this for a week 2 patch. I will put a link down in the description below because I've skipped over lines that I think will be of minimal impact to most players, but there will be some people that will want to check those out. So that's down in the description. I'm going to leave it here though. May your Vaal Orbs have interesting results, and I will see you around.